Hey, MCARBO brother, I'm Chris Nelson, President of MCARBO. You guys asked for it, so we delivered it. A video showing how to install the CZ75 kit into the Decocker models for the CZ75 series. So this will work for the CZ75 SP-01, which is what we're demoing on here, CZ75BD, CZ75D PCR. So if you've got a Decocker, this is the kit that you want. So hammer back, and the Decocker model is what we're striving to install this spring kit into. I will say that it's a little bit difficult on that Sear cage. You know, it's a little more advanced, but it's not impossible. We took the time to make sure that we included a special toolkit for the Decocker model. So we didn't want to leave you guys high and dry on that. We didn't want to just sell a product that creates more problems than it solves. So the whole thing about MCARBO is we are problem solvers. That is what we are. So we want to make sure we give you a good DIY kit that helps you solve a problem, not create more. So really happy that we put the time into this to make sure it's a fully comprehensive DIY installation, allows you to do it. If you can't get it done, we can do it for you. Send us the parts in a bag, in a box with the gun. We'll make it happen. So in this one, we got a great reduction, 50% reduction on the single action trigger pull and a 30% reduction on the double action. Really happy with it. Let's get on over to tabletop, show you how we put it in. Parts needed for this build, the CZ75 trigger spring kit by MCARBO. Now this is the Decocker model spring kit here. Same as a regular kit, but it includes the assembly tools that you need specifically for the Decocker model only. So it includes all the other components, so a lighter CZ75 hammer spring, lighter firing pin spring, lighter firing pin block spring, lighter Sear spring, lighter trigger return spring, and the heavy duty firing pin retaining pin, 1,800 pounds shear strength, and then the little assembly installation tool included as well. And in addition, for the Decocker models, it's got the assembly tool kit that's required for that Sear cage. Specifically, you can see the models that it'll work for up here. So the CZ75 SP-01, 75BD, 75D PCR, P-01, 97BD, and the 40B. All right, so if it's got a Decocker, this is the kit you want. And not to mention the new component that we've added to help make our CZ75s a little bit stronger, a solid floating trigger pin. And now the cool thing about this is it's S7 tool steel, heat treated to Rockwell 50. So really phenomenal improvement. It's floating so that you don't have to worry about it being held in and captured by the frame. So no more left to right, right to left, or getting confused. It's captured by the trigger return spring. So it's a little narrower there in the center, and that's what captures and holds it and retains it in place. Not to mention a solid pin as opposed to the hollow pin from the factory. So let's go ahead and put these in. Tools needed for this build: hammer, 1/16 inch punch, 3/32 inch punch, 1/8 inch punch, bench block, micro tip flathead screwdriver, Phillips head screwdriver, needle nose pliers, and as always guys, make sure we're an iPro. As always, let's take this opportunity together, check your firearms, make sure they're clear, check the chamber, bolt face, magazine well. This firearm's clear. All right, let's see what we get for a factory double action trigger pull. 10 pounds, 0.3 ounces. Let's take one more factory double action trigger pull to confirm. Man, that thing is a beast. 10 pounds, 0.6 ounces. All right, let's see what we got for a single action trigger pull. 4 pounds, 0.2 ounces. Let's take one more to confirm. 4 pounds, 2.3 ounces. All right guys, by popular request, here is your Decocker lever video. So we've got a CZ75 SP-01 here. Now it'll also work for the other ones, the CZ75 SP-01 Tactical, CZ75 SP-01 Phantom. Also work for the CZ75BD, the CZ75D PCR, and also the CZ40B. Even though it doesn't have a Decocker lever, it does have that Sear housing, Sear cage that's similar to this. So hopefully it's useful. Looking forward to your feedback on it. Hopefully I can top that previous video, we'll see. Now field strip, same concept as the other CZ75. So we'll line up these two little tick marks, one on the slide, one on the frame, and then we'll push on this takedown pin right here. Also happens to be a slide stop. So we'll line it up, keep it in place, push down on your bench block, take your little micro tip. I like to just pop it up, you know, just try not to scratch anything. So there's your takedown lever there. All right, and this is the orientation that was inside the frame there. Set that aside. Now we'll go ahead and separate our slide from the frame. So you can see your slide there, see your frame internals there. Quick little view before we start messing with everything. Try to study it as you go too. Always helps to have a reference or photographic memory in this case. Now these guys did do a little polishing to this thing already, so you can see it's blinging a little bit there on the firing pin block. It's gonna happen. We get guns in, guys get to them so fast, it's hard for me to keep up. But there's a good view for you. Hopefully that's useful. We'll set the frame aside for now. We'll go ahead and tack the slide. All right, real straightforward. I'm gonna remove this plastic guide rod and recoil spring. We've got a stainless steel option on the way now. So you just compress it and pull up on it. Kind of locates on that little dimple right there inside that lug on the barrel. See that? All right, we'll set this piece aside. Go ahead and pull the barrel up and out. Set that aside. Now our slide is ready to go. We can start working on this. So I'll position it on the bench block just like this. You know, I've got the right side facing up. We're going to tap through on that pin right there. That's holding everything together. It's holding the firing pin in place with the firing pin spring and our firing pin block lever here with the firing pin block lever spring. So those are two springs we're going to be replacing. So we'll start with tapping out this little pin here, and this one's weak. You'll see it's just some kind of mild steel just coiled together. It's not very great. And you can't reuse them. Not very long. Here's an example of one that we've tried to reuse, and during our testing we wanted to see like how many times could you take it out, put it back in. Not very many. So there it is. Looks like pure hell. So we've got that heavy duty takedown pin in the kit to replace that deficiency right there. So if you're going to be taking it apart even once, you know, it's recommended you don't even put it back in. A lot of guys don't. So having that replacement's key. I'm going to take 3 32 inch punch and I'm going to start tapping away here. It's the first step. Get this thing out. It's going to be a little bit of tapping. It's always good to check your progress, make sure nothing weird's happening. And kind of feel it start to make its way through there. Almost there. All right, so there we go. So we got our punch all the way through. We're just going to kind of leave it in there for a second. Helps take another punch and just set it over that firing pin there because it's going to want to naturally go flying. All right, go ahead and remove your punch. Carefully we'll ease out that firing pin there. Now your firing pin block is going to stop it, so just push down on your firing pin block. All right, we're going to slowly let it all out. And keep a punch over both items, the firing pin and the firing pin block. Once you get that firing pin out, that firing pin block's going to want to fly away on you. Not a big deal if it does. I guess it is if you're on carpet or something like that, but you know, nobody likes to look for springs. So a controlled explosion here. All right, so there's our firing pin block, and that's the way it's going to locate inside the slide, just like that. All right, so we'll go ahead and take this out, set it down. So we got our firing pin out already, but the spring's still inside. So there it is. So we can set all this stuff down and review it real quick. All right, so this is everything we've taken apart so far on our slide. So we've got our slide stop, takedown lever up here, our barrel, plastic guide rod, and recoil spring. We've got a stainless steel option coming here shortly. Slide. We've got our little firing pin takedown pin. We've got our firing pin block stop here, firing pin block stop spring. We've got our firing pin spring. So we're going to replace these two springs right here, the firing pin spring and the firing pin block stop spring. All right, let's go ahead and open up our CZ75 trigger spring kit by MCARBO, the Decocker model kit. So there's the kit there. You can see this is a lighter hammer spring, lighter trigger return spring, lighter firing pin block spring, lighter firing pin spring, lighter Sear spring right here in the center. Then your little assembly tool there for the trigger return spring. This is your heavy duty firing pin retaining pin here. It's a heavy duty tempered spring steel, 1,800 pound shear strength. Then we've got our little assembly tool kit here for the Decocker models only. So that's the only difference between the regular kit and the Decocker model kit. We got some extra tools there to help assist the project. I've got the MCARBO springs over here on the right. I'm going to dump all the factory springs here on the left. There's a quick side-by-side. All right, so you can see the factory springs, thicker gauge wire, a lot more coils. All right, we can do a little springiness test if you like. So MCARBO spring over here, factory spring here, you can see major difference. And then we can do another one here with the firing pin block stop spring. There's the factory one. So MCARBO spring here on the right, factory spring on the left here. All right, it's hard to really compress these, but you can see they both want to jump around. All right, we'll have to go ahead and just see the proof in the pudding here, but you get an idea. All right, definitely a difference in the springs. Put the factory ones aside. It's always handy to keep them. You know, you never know, you might need them in the future. Go ahead and grab our firing pin, get our MCARBO firing pin spring right over there. All right, set it down, and then we'll do the same with the firing pin block stop. Little hole in the bottom, go ahead and insert our spring in there. All right, set it down, and now we can go ahead and put it all back together. We will also need our heavy duty firing pin takedown pin, so that's this one right here. You can see with the single large slot there in the center. This is high tempered steel, 1,800 pound shear strength. Love it. So you can reuse this as many times as you want. You know, you've got a limited lifespan over here in the factory one. A lot of guys don't even recommend reusing it, and I completely see why. It's just kind of thin metal rolled together, and it deforms rather quickly. And you'll notice, you know, the center usually will have a deformation there from the firing pin as well. So it's already a weak point that can break. All right, so we'll set that factory pin aside. All right, now it's a quick little process here. So we'll start with our firing pin block stop right here. Going to insert it in this orientation. So we're going to drop it right into that hole there on the back of the slide, just like this. All right, get that started first. Make sure it's all the way in, moves freely up and down. All right, go ahead and grab your firing pin, 3/32 inch punch. We're going to use that to hold down this firing pin block stop. We want these two little notches right here on the firing pin to be facing the top of the slide. So the way the slide is oriented, sitting on the table like this, we're going to obviously point those notches down towards the table. You should just see the smooth end as we're inserting it. Push down on this firing pin block stop first. Want to make sure we get adequate clearance for the firing pin to go through. So you're just pushing down about halfway on that firing pin block stop, and you'll feel it. It's going to allow that firing pin to drop right in, and then we're going to have to compress it as far as possible. So take that 1/8 inch punch. All right, we're going to push down the firing pin block stop, compress that firing pin all the way. All right, let go of that firing pin block stop, and it should capture it. So it's captured right there. That's good, so it's not going to go anywhere. That's really nice. Always helps in the installation. Now when you look through there, you see a little bit of interference at this point. So if we take our 1/8 inch punch and we push on that firing pin, notice how you get some clearance all of a sudden. So when we're pushing that firing pin all the way in, just like that, we've got the adequate clearance we need to get that pin all the way through. All right, so we're just going to leave it like this for a second because we need to get that pin started first. But I just wanted you to be aware of that. Once we start hammering away, you definitely want to make sure you've got clearance for the pin to go through. So we'll go ahead and get our heavy-duty firing pin retaining pin started. Make sure that little slot there is facing the 12 o'clock, the top of the slide here. So slot facing the top of the slide. Go ahead and get it in the hole and give her a few taps, get it started. All right, good. So we got it started. I'm not quite 12, I'm maybe 11 and a half. That's okay. We just want to make sure this is the general orientation. All right, so we're going to flip it on over. We're going to take a look on this side and see how we're doing. So we got it started in the side of the frame here, so we didn't go too far. We didn't go any farther than this thickness here. All right, now the goal is to compress it, just like what we demonstrated earlier. We're going to compress it till it's about flush. So if you get your punch on the side like that, you know, you're going to bottom out right there on the slide. You're not going to push it way negative. You don't need to do that. So we'll push it right like that, flush with the slide. All right, so get it positioned just like that. And then what I like to do is just push straight down on the table as I'm holding it. Makes it a little bit easier to keep the alignment, and then give it a few taps until we can get it captured. All right, let's see if we got it captured. Definitely not, because it's still moving quite freely. See that? So let's push it back down again, give it a few more taps until we got it captured. And we got it captured. See that? All right, good. So we're making progress here. We just need to finish it on out. So we'll get back to our bench block, tap away. 1/8 inch punch will help drive it the rest of the way through. I'm about flush now. I'm going to take my 3/32 inch punch and use that to kind of make sure that it's recessed a little bit on both sides. All right, it helps to check as you're going there. We're nice and recessed on both sides. Got a ton of brass flakes there from that hammer. They're handy, but they can make a mess. So a little recess on both sides, perfect. So we got our lighter springs installed, the lighter firing pin spring, lighter firing pin block spring. We got our heavy duty firing pin retaining pin in place. So pretty much good to go on this slide. We just need to put a couple items back together. Go ahead and take your barrel, drop it right in. Take our plastic guide rod and recoil spring, we'll drop that right in. We got a stainless steel replacement on the way. And just compress it and get that little tab on the head of that guide rod to locate right there on that lug of the barrel. Should kind of pop and seat in place. All right, good. Now we've got our little takedown lever. Won't need that till later. So we got our slide completely put back together and our takedown lever, that's all that's left over, slide stop. We'll go ahead and jump right into the frame next. We'll put those aside, grab our frame, and let's get started on that. All right, so let's take a quick little look inside the frame here. You can see your trigger return spring up here. Take a look at that orientation. You see that little bend in the leg and how it kicks back and goes center again. That's important. The short leg ends up going inside the trigger. Can't really see it from this view, but then you got your trigger bar, continues back. Your trigger bar spring down here, if you ever get an issue with the double action not working, it's because this trigger bar has not got enough tension on it. All right, so that's a good little troubleshooting technique there. Figured I'd mention it because every now and again you can easily bend these springs and then it not work, so that's always a little frustrating. Then you've got your ejector here. You've got your decocker lever over here. That's important. So it's good to see how this function works. So when the hammer's cocked back, hit the decocker lever. All right, let's do that again. Anything you can memorize ahead of time, super helpful. So unique to this video is the decocker lever assembly, which also has the Sear captured in the center there. So this is your Sear right here. That flat blade portion is what engages with the hammer. So that orientation is exactly like this here. So that flat blade will be down towards the hammer. I always like to include little common sense triggers to help you remember where it might go. And then you can see the Sear spring right here and how that long leg carries through furthest in the assembly. And you've got this little tiny spring right next to it that captures a little bit shorter, all right? So the leg of that spring is much shorter than the Sear spring. This is your decocker lever spring. So this is what keeps that tension on the decocker lever, and particularly the way it interacts with the decocker lever, which is right here. So this is your actual decocker lever. This is technically your left and right decocker lever controller as per the exploded view in the manual. So your physical decocker lever is right here, and then your decocker lever spring right here, your Sear in the middle, and your Sear spring. So most important. And then this little guy on the far right is your firing pin block lever. So memorize this orientation, maybe make note of where this is in the video. Super helpful when we put it back together. So decocking lever spring, Sear spring, and then your firing pin block lever over here. All right, I think we should be good to go. One last look at it, and let's start ripping it apart. Take your Phillips head screwdriver and let's remove the screw that holds the grip in on both sides. Grip comes right off. There's a little lock washer down there. Keep it all in place. Set it aside. All right, we're gonna flip it over, do the same on the other side, same. All right, set those grips aside. Now we can start looking at the internals. So you can see your magazine guide right here. And what that does is it guides the magazine and protects the hammer spring linkage, keeps it all intact and out of the way. So you can see how that functions right there. All right, nice and easy. So we're gonna start with the hammer spring first. We're gonna replace that one. All right, so we wanna make sure there's no tension on the hammer spring. So let's go ahead and hit that decocker lever, let that hammer go forward. All right, your magazine guide, let's remove that first. So you're just gonna pull back on it like this. So there's a little tab right there that locates inside the mainspring housing plug, hammer spring plug. All right, we're gonna push down on the table and we're gonna take our 3/32 inch punch and just push that smooth pin right through. All right, push it on the table, 3/32 inch punch, pushed it right through, and back out your punch, slowly release, and it all comes out just like that. And you can see how it's retained and captured right there in that notch. All right, there's our hammer spring. Then you can see your hammer spring strut right here. All right, magazine guide still kind of flopping right there. We'll put it all back together shortly here. So this little segment's done. We're gonna set these items aside. We'll come back to them. Let's keep going on the disassembly. So the main event, we're trying to get this Sear housing out. All right, Sear cage, Sear housing. All right, this is where all the action happens. All right, this is gonna be fun. Could be a little tedious, fair warning there. Now what we're gonna do, we're gonna remove the decockered lever here on the right side. And what you'll see is there's a little tiny spring-loaded lever right there. See that? We're gonna take our little micro tip and pry that down and then pop this lever right off. If you flip it over and look at the other side, there's nothing there. All right, it's just solid. All right, so take your little micro tip and you're gonna pull down on that spring-loaded lever. And then your 1/16 inch punch, just kind of grab that little corner there on the back side, the little channel, and pull up a little bit. So it's a simultaneous thing. You're going to be basically pulling down on this lever as you're pulling up on the decocker lever. And it pops up out of place like that. So you can see what that lever looks like. So we were prying right here in that little corner so that we get clearance right there. So you see how that little bar is what provides the interference to get the lock and locate. And it's under a good amount of tension, and you have to get it pretty dang far down there. And then we took our little 1/16 inch punch and got it right in there and popped it right up. So if you got 2 micro tips, that's great. You should be able to do it. I always like to demonstrate with simple tools. You know, I don't expect everybody to have 2 micro tips. All right, guys, up to this point, we've got our decocking lever out, which is great. Now we're moving on to the more challenging portion, removal of the Sear housing assembly, AKA Sear cage. All right, like we mentioned previously, the Sear pin here has a larger head on the left-hand side of the frame. Flip it on over. On the right side here, you can see it's much smaller. Definitely something to take notice of. We're only gonna push it one way, and that's from right to left. We're gonna push out on this small head, drive everything out. All right, let's go ahead and take a good close look at the operation. So go ahead and pull that trigger and see how everything's moving. We definitely want to replicate that. Take notice how the firing pin block lever is moving, the Sear is moving, and your decocking lever is moving when you're pulling back on that trigger. All right, we want to replicate all of that. All right, I'm going to shoot you straight on this one. I mean, this is challenging, definitely a little bit advanced. So if you're not really comfortable with taking it apart, then don't do it. With the disassembly toolkit that comes with it for the decocker lever models, it's definitely doable, and we spent a lot of time refining it, so it was a DIY process. You know, I believe we're a company that solves problems, not creates them, so I definitely want to just give you that quick little disclaimer there that it could be a little more than you want to jump into. I looked at all the videos on YouTube. Nobody really gave a good DIY how to get this apart. You know, a lot of guys made it look so easy and simple, and I know after doing this, they definitely edited the crap out of those videos. We're gonna give you a good, no BS, straightforward way how to do it yourself. If you do have an issue, you know, you can always send it in to us. We do offer the custom work, but I would like to see everybody be as successful as possible doing it themselves. That's why we created this custom kit, this tool kit for this portion here. All right, just don't want you cursing my name as we're doing this. All right, so you get this little tool kit with the Decocker model for the CZ75. All right, so you got a little piece of 50,000 shim stock there. That's a little black piece of plastic. Yours is gonna be clear. And then you got the assembly disassembly pin there, all right, which is super critical, very helpful. We're gonna start, let's go ahead and open this bag. All right, so go ahead and get started with putting in our shim stock. All right, there's our 50,000 Sear shim stock to stabilize it. You're just gonna drop it right in for now, right in that little crack right there. You can see that. And it's gonna get a lot easier to manipulate here going forward, but for right now, it's just gonna sit there. All right, and that's gonna help. Once we get the Sear cage out, we'll be able to get it really compressed and really locked in there, and it's going to help with the disassembly. But for now, that's what we got. All right, you can leave your hammer back or you can put your hammer forward. Really doesn't matter. I'm going to leave it back for the camera. Then take your assembly disassembly tool, all right, steel pin, cut perfectly, diameter, length, to make sure that we can capture the Sear cage. You're going to start pushing out that Sear pin. And what I recommend, you know, I would love to just demonstrate this slowly for the camera, and I will, but I recommend you guys just push down on the table and just make it a one smooth, clean, quick motion if you can. If you get snagged there in the middle, then you'll use that micro tip to move those springs around as needed. But definitely just push down on the table if you can. I wouldn't do what I'm about to do. I'm just doing it so you can see. You know, I'm slowly kind of moving along, and I'm likely going to hit a snag here. Well, getting lucky so far. Pretty dang lucky. But if you push down on the table, it should all go through nice and clean. So what'll happen is these coils on these two springs here will kind of move around and shift. You know, when they do this from the factory, they're using fixtures. You know, they're not doing this by hand. So that's why we had to come up with an assembly disassembly toolkit here to make life a little bit better. All right, we're nearly there. Let's push forward in that decocking lever a little bit, about 90% of the way there. So what I'm gonna do is pull out that Sear pin, just a hair to see where I'm at. Okay, there goes the decocking lever. So I definitely want to get that back in on that Sear pin. You want to make sure you get this completely stabilized before you pull it out. So definitely no shortcuts here. And what we can do is push on this Sear pin back into the assembly to try to find out where we got out of alignment. And it's right there where that Sear is. See that? The Sear is kind of pitched up. I can barely see that rim of the through hole that goes through the Sear for the pins. So I'm going to push down in that corner right there, and I'm going to try to get that Sear pin back in. I just did. All right, now I'm just pushing down on the Sear and the decocking lever, trying to keep them stabilized as I'm pushing this through. There's that little coil there and that decocking lever spring that was kind of binding everything up. So you saw it kind of jump right there. And it's a bit of a you know, troubleshooting process when you get caught up in the alignment there. So definitely take the time to kind of go through it just like that. All right, so we got it most of the way through there at this point. I mean, we are nearly there. Don't even need this Sear pin any longer. As we back it out, let's take a look. So you push down the Sear cage, you can see that pin. All right, we're just missing that last hole there on the Sear cage to get it all captured. So we'll continue to push down, troubleshoot a little bit. You can see it's that decocking lever as well that's kind of jumping out of alignment. So I'm gonna push on this side, manipulate the decocking lever a little bit, also the Sear, try to make sure that everything is lined up appropriately. There it is. And that's a good sign. That was the disconnector there, just popping it up. So you get your hammer and your disconnector right here and how it sits on the trigger bar just like this. So there's our Sear cage assembly right there. We're just missing that one little piece. You know, that pin wasn't completely all the way through. It was still kind of binding up on this side of the frame. Once it did get through, and it just popped right up. So it's nice. So you don't have a big explosion. We can basically cut a lot of time off of this little exchange by having it complete like this. There's a whole lot of stuff that you're gonna skip. Whereas if you took it all apart into pieces, it's gonna be a very tedious process. This is gonna make it quote unquote easy. So we'll go ahead and we'll set the frame down. Let's focus on this Sear cage, all right? And we'll go through it and replace that Sear spring. All right, so now we're gonna do a quick exchange on the Sear spring. Go ahead and have your punches ready. You see I got the bench block here and I got some 1-inch strips of masking tape handy. Get about 3 of those set up, ready to go. Got our Sear pin, got our Sear cage, little micro tip screwdriver. If you got any other tools, you know, fine picks or anything like that, it's helpful, but I like to do videos that show simple tools. I don't want it to be misleading ever. So Simple tools, should be able to do it with a little bit of patience and time and instructions. So hopefully these are good enough. All right, we're gonna go ahead and grab our sear spring out of the kit. Want that lighter sear spring. We're just replacing that in this portion. So get your lighter sear spring there. All right, have that ready. We're gonna need that. All right, let's take one more good look at our sear cage here. So you can see your ejectors up here. We're gonna orient everything off of that more or less when we're talking here. Your firing pin block lever is over here on the right, far right, away from the ejector. Tiny microscopic little firing pin block lever spring in there. You can barely see it. It is very thin. You just want to make sure that leg is captured in that firing pin block lever right there. See it? Barely captured, and then the other piece is up against the housing. So we want to make sure that's in that alignment. You know, it's got to function correctly. We don't want to forget anything. We don't want to put it back together and have this spring off, and then we got to go through it all again. So definitely check that. It's hard to see, so make sure you do. Take the extra step to look at it. And then we got our sear over here. All right, we got our sear shim in place. We're going to adjust that here in a second. Factory sear spring right here. The long leg going in this long channel here, and then our decocking lever spring right here. Short leg, short channel. All right, and then our decocking lever. And the decocking lever needs to function, so you need to be able to push on it. See this back edge right here? This back edge will rise when you push on it. It's under some good tension there. So pushing on it, you can see it moving. And what we're gonna do right this second before we flip it over is let's get our sear shim in place. So go ahead and just press down on it and drop it right in place. It should bottom out down here on this ledge of the sear. You just want to make sure that it's providing good tension on that sear. You want to make sure it's going to keep it in place, because once we start moving pins around, that sear is going to want to jump out of alignment and then everything's thrown off. You can see how I got the sear shim in place. It's captured real nice right there, providing some good alignment. Flipped over. All right, you see the ejector up here? Gives you a little orientation on where we're at. Not too complicated, not a whole lot we need to do down here except rotate your assembly so the ejector is pointing down. All right, we're looking up in this direction here. Take a look at this decocking lever spring right here. All right, it's setting all the tension on that decocking lever. So you see that? So this little leg right here is part of the sear. This little leg with the 90-degree bend is part of the decocking lever. And then the spring winds up and sits right forward of the decocking lever. And that's what gives it that tension. It's going to move this direction. That little post down there is part of the sear, so don't worry about that. Mainly focused on decocking lever spring and getting it set up on that post right there, so there's good tension on it. So what we'll do is we're going to remove that leg of the spring to release some of the tension. So I like to take a little 1/16 inch punch, just get down in there and pop it out of place, just like that. So we just let it go. You know, a lot of the tension is released. It's gonna make life a little bit easier on us. That coil spring, not gonna try to compress and torque and get all crazy on there. All right, so we got our sear cage assembly disassembly tool already in there that came from the kit. Take your sear pin. Notice there's a rounded portion of the pin, then there's a flat portion. We're gonna use that rounded portion. All right, it's gonna help us kind of get through all the springs. We're gonna use this as another assembly tool. Now we're starting on this side with the firing pin block lever because it's got that microscopic spring in there. The outer diameter of this pin is perfect to take up the entire inner diameter of this hole. So we're gonna go ahead and start sliding it through, capturing everything, until we get to this edge right here of the sear. That's where we're gonna stop. That way we can go ahead and remove the sear spring here. So it helps to kind of play with the pins. You know, you're gonna be moving this one a little bit, moving this one. You want them to meet up in the middle. So if you get to a roadblock, like I am right now, I can't push this any further. I'm gonna take the assembly pin that came in the kit, and I'm gonna move that and try to push back on that sear pin. You know, I can move it back and I can see pretty good, but I wanna make sure we got it completely captured. I wanna keep that alignment intact. I mean, that's the whole point of what we're trying to achieve here. Just keep thinking alignment in this whole process. All right, good. So I can see that head of the sear pin is capturing this portion of the sear. I can see it right there in that hole. Once you see that, you're good. Then we can back it up a little bit. You see how I'm just rotating this pin out? Very small movements. And I can see that we've got good clearance now on that sear. All right, so we can remove it. But what I want to do, since this diameter of the pin is smaller than the hole, I'm going to take that masking tape and lock it down. I'm telling you, you don't want to get everything perfect, start removing it, and then that dang pin just falls out on you. So a lot of good things learned through experience here that I love to share with you guys, and hope to hear everybody's successful with it. All right, So it's all captured. It's not gonna fall out on me. That's what I'm most worried about. And you got a couple pieces of tape handy, you know, so you can grab them. That's the goal too, having them right there. So when you need it, you can just grab it. Just make sure that tape's not covering up that channel there because we are removing this spring. If you had a pick or something, you could easily grab that coil, pull it out. You could use a paper clip too, or you could just take your punch and just push up from underneath. So I can see there's the Sear spring right there. Just gonna push up on it. Just like that. We're gonna do the same thing. We're gonna drop it in exactly like that. So you can see where that little short leg is. You can see where the long leg is. We're gonna just pop it right in, all right? So we'll do a quick exchange here. So there's a factory Sear spring. Go ahead and drop that. Grab the MCARBO Sear spring. All right, we're gonna drop it right in. Lay it in there. We're gonna position it here in a second. Get it all turned around as we need it. Okay, so it's starting to cooperate. We got it in a good position here. I'm gonna jump on over to my micro tip. This is my go-to. Everybody's got their go-to tool. All right, get it all lined up, perfect. Hold it down in place. You got your little Sear pin, factory one. I'm just pushing it to locate and grab it, just like that. So we've successfully exchanged the Sear spring without removing any of the other stuff. And I hope this is the way you did it. If you didn't, God bless you, man. You can always send it in to us, even in a bag of pieces. We'll take care of it, we'll help you out. Obviously, you know, there's a fee for labor, but you know, we've done it enough that it's not a huge deal. But this is definitely the way to do it. I spent a lot of time really refining this process to hopefully make it easy for you guys. Now we're not in the woods yet, so let's make sure we finish the job here. So we need to keep pushing our Sear assembly tool here, the one that came in the kit, all the way through. We gotta get this pin out. You know, the factory Sear pin's got to come out because it's not going to be the right length. We can't drop in the assembly. So we're going to go ahead and just push on that tape there, all right? You can remove the tape too. You don't need to keep it on there, but I'm always paranoid of that pin falling out. When you're pulling the tape off, try not to pull your pin out with it. So it's kind of a delicate operation here. Anything can screw up the whole shebang. It's not that big a deal to have tape on there. You can just keep pushing it off the tape. So start pushing with the pin. You know, and if you have any alignment issues, you can just push back on this Sear pin towards the center until you get, you know, a good feel of where you're at, good alignment, and then push the installation tool pin all the way through. And you want to make sure you definitely keep good tension on both pins. So we're still pushing on the Sear pin here against the assembly tool because I want to make sure we get that little tiny spring of the firing pin decocking lever captured. You know, I don't want to miss that because that can be a pain in the neck. So make sure you're kind of pushing equal pressure against the pins as you're driving them through. Keep your little Sear shim in place. Hopefully that's not falling out of place on you like mine sort of is. There it goes. So it can be a delicate operation. So I can tell right now where I'm at that I wasn't getting a good bite right there on that Sear. So I was driving through the assembly tool and I wasn't really lined up on that Sear, and these coil springs can do that. So I'm going to kind of pay attention here, drive that little pin through, trying to line them up. Since I'm at this point, I'm going to get rid of this dang tape. All right, so I'm going to push back on the factory Sear pin, make sure everything's lined up good. Now I'm going back through with the installation tool pin that came in the kit. Really want to make sure I get that spring captured. Use my micro tip just to make sure I get that spring captured, and I'm just going to push all the way through once I get it right where it needs to be to drop out that factory pin. Factory pin's kind of doing a good job staying in place. There we go. So I was able to thread the needle there, got everything right through. All right, one shot. Takes you a couple tries, don't worry about it. Definitely took all of us a couple tries to get it right. But that's it. I mean, that's pretty straightforward. Now we want to make sure we check everything. We got to set the tension again on that decocking lever spring. Now here's the firing pin block lever. Firing pin block lever spring. You can see it a little bit better now. But you got a leg right there, you got a leg right there. So they're captured very well. You know, you want to make sure this leg is in that corner recess of it. I don't really want to mess with it right now because we don't have the factory pin in there. So it could just easily pop off, so don't bother. All right, leave it in this configuration. We're good, we'll test it all again later. All right, got our Sear spring in place. Got that little leg right there resting against the Sear. That's where it needs to be. Long legs in that channel there. Then we got our decocking lever spring here. Short legs in that channel. And our decocking lever right here. Now we're gonna flip it over, make sure that pin does not fall out. Got to keep, you know, your fingers over both sides, or you can put tape on both sides. But now we need to make sure we set the tension on the decocking lever here. All right, so our ejector's pointing down, the same orientation was what we had earlier. All right, this little pin right here looks like a pin. It's part of the Sear, so don't worry about that. It can stay right there. I've got my decocking lever centered up right here. I'm gonna hold it with my finger, and then I'm gonna take my micro tip and pull out on this spring. Pull out far enough so I can get it around, and then I'm just gonna kind of lay it up just like that. Micro tip is my go-to tool. If you got a pick or something like that, it might be even easier to use that. All right, so there we go. So we got the tension set on the decocking lever. Keep your fingers on the holes. Do not let that assembly tool fall out. We don't want to go backwards here. All right, so we're testing the decocking lever. Good, it's got good tension on it. Perfect. All right, everything looks good down here. Just make sure that decocking lever spring is moved over as much as it can be. You know, they kind of float around, both springs on that pin there. All right, good. So at this point, we are 100% go. We did it. Good job. You got this far, excellent work. If you hadn't yet, keep it up, man. You're almost there. Learn as you go. It's OJT here, on the job training. It's not impossible, but it is challenging. But you should get some good satisfaction. You get this done, man, you have good skills. You know, if you don't get it done, you can always send it in to us and we'll take care of you. All right, at this point, the Sear cage is reassembled. All right, now we're gonna drop our Sear cage into the frame here. All right, just a couple things I want to point out while we're here. See that trigger bar there? This is the trigger bar, this whole piece. You want to make sure that it's nice and flush against the frame right here. See that? You should have good tension on that trigger bar spring. So your trigger bar spring is right here, it goes on both sides of the trigger bar. It should be nice and flush right there. So if you got a major gap or you push on it and it doesn't really reset, bend the spring up a little bit so you got good tension on it. All right, otherwise your double action is not going to work. So if you have that issue, at least you know where to go back and fix it, but go ahead and take a good look at it now, make sure it's good to go. All right, and then you can see your disconnector right here. You want to make sure that's captured inside the trigger bar just like that. So we got our Sear cage all reassembled. Still have that assembly tool in there. All right, keeping everything lined up, which is a dream. There's 2 notches there on the back of the Sear cage. You can see that. We want to make sure that locates inside the frame. So what we're going to do is just drop it in and push down, push it straight back, just like that. So you see that? So once everything's lined up exactly where it's supposed to be, push down, push it straight back, and it'll lock and locate in place. And then you can see that assembly tool right there, nice and shiny, ready to go. So now what we'll do is we're going to take our Sear pin and push it all the way through. Remember that little end that's got a little bit of a dome on it compared to the flat end? That little end with the dome on it, we're going to push it all the way through. So on the left-hand side of the frame, the larger hole, the smaller hole's there on the right side. So on the larger hole, we're going to push that factory Sear pin through. Let's go ahead and just push right down on the table, and it's all going to go through one clean shot. And then if we have any issues, we're going to diagnose it. Holding it, you know, the Sear cage in place, you can start to get it going first. Kind of make sure it's fed into the Sear cage. And then once it is, let's push down on that table real quick. So we got all of it but one, that little tiny spring right there. That is your firing pin block lever spring. So we didn't pull it out earlier, but this is a bonus in the video. There you go. Microscopic, tiny. This sucks, but it's not too bad. It is recoverable, and we're gonna go through that here. We get to enjoy this together. If you got it all the way through, champion. All right, if you're in the same boat as me, well, we're gonna have some fun together. All right, Saturday school. So here we go. We're gonna push back on that factory pin just a hair, so we can get access right there to put it in its home. That's where it belongs, right there. You can take your bench block and turn it up just like this, kind of hold your frame in place, mostly. Take your little 1/16 inch punch, all right, and we're gonna push back just enough to where we can make some clearance for it, so you can start to see a little bit of space there. We don't want to lose any alignment, and that's a tricky thing about this is, you know, you start pushing the pin out, you start to kind of play with the whole alignment there. So we only went far enough. We still have our firing pin block lever captured and everything else. All right, so we're going to drop in our tiny little microscopic spring. These are frequently lost, rarely found. So be careful with this. You know, you want to get it to drop in there as far as you can without putting any tension on it. Use our micro tip to kind of just guide it in. You know, there'll be a point where you got to compress it and you got to be real delicate. Can't let go of it. Micro tip should help you keep a good bite on it. I'm going to really kind of guide my micro tip against that wall of the Sear housing. See that? You got to be real gingerly with it here. All right, so get it in there. You want to make sure you get that leg to locate in that little corner of that firing pin block lever right here. See that? All right, now I'm going to push straight down on that coil, compressing it, holding it in place, and I'm going to leave it captured just like that, and I'm gripping the crap out of it. Don't want to let that thing go. Now I'm looking through the other side. Should be able to push right through. Coil's clear, so we are ready to go. So there we go. All right, we're in there. Disaster avoided. So if you do have to put that little baby back in, no big deal. Just make sure you got that little leg captured in the corner of that firing pin block lever, just like that. You can see it barely right there. Other legs up here. All right, we got our pin all the way through. A little bit of Saturday school never hurt anybody. So let's check our decocking lever real quick. All right, it's moving freely, good. Backward and forward. And then our Sear right here looks good. Springs are located in place. And then our firing pin block lever, we just got that set under good tension. Excellent. All right, now let's check it for that range of motion we had previously. Everything should move as you pull the trigger. Very good. All right, so everything is set up correctly at this point. So we got through the hardest part. Excellent job if you made it this far. Like I said, if not, we can handle it for you. Just send us a bag of pieces. We don't mind. All right, let's continue on with the install. All right, now let's go ahead and open up our S7 tool steel floating trigger pin. All right, it's got a Rockwell of 50, similar to that of an axe head in terms of strength. It's a really strong pin. It's a solid pin all the way through too, which is excellent. No hollow pin. So the factory pin's hollow. It's got this little tool right here. You don't need it necessarily. I think we're gonna probably stop sending it because you can use this pin right here. It's multi-purpose. It's almost like your assembly tool. I mean, it is a solid pin. S7 tool steel, Rockwell 50 is what it's treated to. This is really hard, very durable. I like how it's gonna be a simple installation. I like that you can take the pin out or install it any direction, left, right, right, left, whatever you want. It's captured in the center by the trigger return spring. So the factory pin is flared on one end and it's captured by the frame. And that's why you have to push it out one direction or the other. So right to left, typically. So this is the flared end right here. So what we're gonna do is we're gonna simply use our S7 tool steel pin as our trigger pin, but also kind of like a little bit of an assembly tool. So we'll get this pin started. Take your 3/32 inch punch, pushing from right to left. So we just got it started. All right, we just started pushing it out. Just gives us enough room to get that pin in there, the S7 tool steel floating trigger pin. So we get it in there as much as we can by hand, and we'll give it a couple taps of the hammer, just real gingerly, soft. We're not nailing this thing in there. All right, and if you get any resistance, we're gonna check alignment. Looks good. You can see the pin right there. Just always good to double check. Move that trigger a little bit if you need to. There, and that's it. So just simple little alignment stuff that helps make all the difference. And I don't have it all the way flush yet for good reason. We're gonna remove this trigger return spring. It's a factory trigger return spring. So I'm gonna take my 3/32 inch punch, push back a little bit, almost there in the center. I'm gonna drop down to my 1/16 so I can get through that little hole on the trigger there. Check the alignment, looks good. Now what we can do, if you're getting any resistance, just push down on the trigger return spring. You know, that'll help make sure you're not missing something. Pull on the trigger just a hair. All right, so it's captured on the pin, which is what it's intended to do. Push forward on that spring a little bit so it's not captured by the pin. All right, and that pin's pretty much ready to rock and roll right out of there. But it's a good example of how it is captured. All right, that spring holds it right in place. Now I'm gonna back out the punch a little bit, get this factory spring out. Go ahead and just grab it with your needle nose pliers, might as well. Otherwise it'll go flying. It's under a good amount of tension, especially this factory one. It is super stout. All right, so we'll put that aside. Let's grab our last two springs here. So we got our lighter hammer spring, have that ready to go. We got our lighter trigger return spring here. Same concept, orientation as the factory spring. You can see it's got that long, crazy leg up here. That's gonna rest in the frame. And that other little leg is gonna go inside the trigger. I'm just gonna grab it, the needle nose pliers, just so I can drop it in at a 45 like this. You know, this is another method. You could pull the whole thing out and set it up with the assembly tool, but I just prefer this. I think it's easier. It's not as bad as what we just went through. We're gonna get that little leg inside the trigger first, and then we're gonna rock it back and push it forward. So little leg is captured. Now I'm rocking it back and I'm pushing it right forward to get it in that channel, just like that. All right, good, we're in position there. I'm just holding it with the needle nose pliers. Now I'm gonna push that pin all the way through. All right, and I love this pin. See how easy that is to manipulate and get it through. This is a beautiful upgrade. If you're ever gonna take your CZ apart, it is a must, just to save you some sanity. Also, the strength is a huge element of this as well. I mean, that's what we really want it for, but if you're taking it apart, man, this really helps. So now what we need to do is get this pin further in, so push on that coil of the trigger return spring, all right, and that allows it to move, just like that. I love stuff that is simple, easy, functional. You don't have to hammer away and mark up your frame like this one is. It's much more geared for takedown. You know, you can disassemble it, do things with it, clean it, rather than something that feels like it's riveted together. So we're all set, you know, everything's captured and located nicely in there. Beautiful, nice and recessed, just a hair on both sides. You know, you want to make sure you got your pin all centered up, good to go. So the trigger return spring's replaced, awesome. Ooh, that feels nice. Man, you're gonna love that. It's worth it. All the little pain and agony on the Decocker model is certainly worth it to get this full effect here. Let's get our Decocker lever back in there first. Want to make sure we got everything set up here before we get all crazy with it. So you're gonna need this piece here and then the other little piece here. All right, we'll start with this one here that's got the shaft already on it, going right in this hole on the left-hand side of the frame. So you can see down that hole, there's that leg of your Sear spring. So we're gonna have to lift that up. So we'll insert the Decocker lever just like this. Start pushing it through, start hitting resistance on your Sear spring right away. So we're gonna pull up on it just enough to get it through all the way. You have to do that again a couple times until it locks and locates in that little cutout. So you can see it's binding up right here on the actual Decocker lever in this little portion of the pin. So what we'll do is we'll push the Decocker lever down just like that and get it past. See that? It's super important to get it all the way through. And you can see our Sear spring right there, how it's sitting in a little notch on the pin. You might be able to see it if I move it, but it should be locked and located just like that. Outside Decocker lever here, right? The one we use to manipulate the Decocker. It's nice and flush. Flip it on over. All right, so go ahead and set the other Decocker lever in place, hold it. Similar to what we did earlier, push down on that little spring-loaded pin on the side. So hold it nice and centered, push down on that pin, and then one smooth motion, you know, once we get that pin all the way down, because you can see it's providing the interference right there. So pull down, and then push straight on, and let it lock back in place. And you certainly want to make sure it's seated and not about to fall off. So what I like to do is just push on that pin, make sure it doesn't fall off, pushing down on the lever. It's fully seated, so we're all good to go there. And you can see it actually functioning and working. Always a nice sign. Now we can put the hammer spring, mainspring back in, all right, and then we are on the downhill slope. For this segment, lighter hammer spring by MCARBO. Then you've got your mainspring hammer spring plug. It's also got that lanyard loop on the bottom and then your pin, and that's what keeps it inside the frame. Pin's gonna go through just like that when we have it all assembled. Pretty straightforward. You remember this magazine guide? I just threw it in there so it wasn't rattling around while you guys are trying to listen. Now, it can get a little deformed like this. It's not exactly straight. So what I like to do is just straighten it back out. It happens when you're taking it apart. It's just really thin metal there. Just helps for the reassembly. So we've got it all situated. Here's our hammer strut right here. So we're gonna take our hammer spring, gonna get it on the hammer strut all the way in, just like that. Helps you got your bench block handy. Then take our hammer spring mainspring plug right there with the lanyard loop. All right, we're gonna insert it just like this. So the notch cut out facing towards us, and we're gonna push straight down, and then we're gonna get that pin through. So it really helps if you just push right down on the tabletop. There's no better method than that. So we got everything lined up, kind of paying attention, how everything's going together. And it helps too if you want to steer that plug, take a punch, stick it in there so you can make sure you got the proper alignment. Get down low on your table and take a look at it, and once you see that hole open up and there's clearance, slide your pin right through, and then it'll lock and locate just like that. Perfect. All right. Then our magazine guide, we're gonna just pop it right into that little hammer spring plug. There's a little notch cut out for it to kind of rest in there. And initially it'll look kind of weird like this. Just push on it until it kind of pops into place. Just want to make sure it's fully seated in there. And we can test it real quick to make sure it's going to provide clearance for a mag, and it does. So that's all good to go there. Beautiful. We are very close. Now we can just put the grips back on. Piece of cake. Flip it on over, put the other grip on. Nice. All right, so we got the frame all back together. Beautiful. We are so close. All right, so take your slide, make sure everything's in there. You know, your recoil spring, your guide rod, barrel. All right, we're good to go. We replaced everything in there already. Line up those lugs there on the frame, slide it back, get to those little tick marks, remember, on the slide and on the frame. Then make sure we got good clearance in that hole there. Take our takedown lever. We're gonna insert it just like this, right in there. Hopefully we get a nice little snap, which is always a great sound. We did. We are back together, guys. Good job. If you made it all the way through, well done. You have some skills. Very good, very good. I hope this is helpful. Let's do a quick little function check before we celebrate. Make sure it's all working. All right, so the hammer's back. Let's make sure this decocker works. Oh, yes. All right, decocker works. Beautiful. Slide stop works. Let's see how that trigger feels. All right, so single action. Nice, double. Man, this is perfect. This is what I hoped and expected. I mean, this kit for the CZ75 has been a huge hit. A lot of guys are loving it. Let's do a quick little trigger pull reading, see how we compare with the other one. Let's see what we get for a modified double action trigger pull. 6 pounds, 11.3 ounces. Let's take one more to confirm. 7 pounds, 0.7 ounces. All right, let's see what we get for a modified single action trigger pull. 2 pounds, 1.5 ounces. That's what I'm talking about. Let's take one more to confirm. 1 pound, 9.4 ounces. Right there in that sweet spot. Love it. Well, there you have it, guys. A nice, smooth, clean trigger pull reduction for your CZ75 SP-01, your CZ75D PCR, your CZ75 BD. If it's got a decocker, this is the kit for it. Really happy with it. We didn't get quite as good of a trigger pull reduction on this one as we did the CZ75B compact, but we did get a great 50% trigger pull reduction on that single action, which is most important. I love that. And the double action is still good, 7 pounds, not bad. Really happy we were able to achieve this, considering the Sear cage can be a little tricky. If you made that happen, good job. Good job. Great skills. I know it was difficult. If you weren't able to get it done, don't be pissed off at the messenger here. Just send it to us. We can make it happen for you. But I'm very confident everybody should have a good fighting chance at making it happen. Just takes a little bit of patience and time. It's not too terrible. So really happy with what we were able to achieve here. Hope this was helpful. Really appreciate you guys. You guys kept asking for this video, so we made it. So just keep asking for whatever videos you want next. We'll make them happen. If you subscribe to the channel, you're always going to get alerts when we got new videos, new stuff. Really appreciate that. Really appreciate you guys spreading the word about these kits and everything else on the forums, asking other third parties to review them, detailed videos on how to install them. All that stuff helps. Really appreciate it. And most importantly, thank you, MCARBO Brotherhood, for all your ideas and your support. Really appreciate that. And as always, happy shooting.